What's up, guys? I'm Alex.
I'm Jason. We're the Table Monkeys, and we are back with another video talking about advancing your game. The last video in this series was called The Hook, A Deeper Look. This is going to be the top roll, gain control, because that's really what the top roll is about. It's about that hand control, and that's how the top roll came about, right? In the beginning of arm wrestling, it was all even called wrist wrestling, where it was just wrist to wrist. And when you're doing it like that, who has the stronger bicep, basically, and shoulder? It's just about the arm. So when you're what started to happen was people realizing that in order to beat somebody who has a stronger arm than me, if I can utilize my hand or get control of their hand, then I can get access or take their access of power away from their arm, right? So that's really what the top rolls are about hand control. And they were sort of invented to counter the hook. So last week we were talking about how hook versus hook works, though we will talk a little bit about top roll versus top roll in this video. It's more so about how to utilize the top roll against the hook and which one versus which top roll works best against which hook. So there's kind of two versions of hooking. There's sort of drag hooking and drive hooking, which is what we talked about last week. And then there's kind of two versions of top rolling. There's posting and low handing, and we're going to talk about how those work together. So the first is going to be posting, which works the best against dragging. So we're going to show why it works against dragging and why it doesn't work against going like driving hooks, and then how that counters to the low hand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so posting first. So what is the objective in posting top rolls?
So the objective in a posting top roll is to go over the hand to gain control of your opponent's hand. So he's attacking me with riser first to gain control over the top portion of the hill while breaking my riser, controlling with controlling the containment with the top part of his hand.
Yeah, so really when you're setting up for a posting top roll, the first thing you're really trying to do is focus on this knuckle of your opponent. And what I'm trying to do is get my fingers as close to that knuckle as possible. So like Alex said, I can maintain containment or control through that knuckle. And then I'm basically going up and rising again to gain control by going over the top of my opponent's hand. Once we've gotten to this position, it's then depending on how you are as a puller, whether you go more to the side or more back pressure. Both top rolls are going to involve a lot of back pressure, a lot of side pressure, and all that. But the real difference is whether you're going over, utilizing what we kind of consider up pressure, or whether you're utilizing drag pressure like you will in a low hand, which we'll show later. So again, the posting top roll works against the drag really well. So a dragging hook, which Alex will demonstrate, is coming back and down to the pad that way, trying to pull my pronation out and pull me down towards the pad, or towards the back of the table, not to the peg, if that makes sense. So again, if I'm trying to control this knuckle here and try to break up really, really hard, this is where because he's going down and I'm coming up, it gives me an opportunity to really gain control of that high part of his hand and break his hand open this way. If he pulls back really hard and starts to open up from his arm, it might make more sense for me to finish him by coming back to, more back pressure. And depending on how he likes to pull or what the leverages are, it might make more sense for me at that point to just go to the side. But I initiated everything by going over the hand. I'm trying to maintain a high knuckles to the ceiling, and then whether I'm going to the side or whether I'm finishing more back, again, depends on the situation after that sort of point of entry, right? Like Devin says, never plan past the point of entry. The point of entry here is knuckles high, get that rise, get yourself established in that posting position, and then go from there.
Now the hook and drive works really well against the post.
Exactly.
So if you know your opponent's going to go to the side to gain a hook, then that's where you would have to switch your top roll, right?
Exactly. So let's just show that quick why. So because I'm trying to post and maintain all this up pressure and my back pressure that I'm establishing is all generated from that up position. If Alex drags down, it works great. But if Alex drives to the side on me, it really crashes me down and usually puts me in a very shitty hook position. And also this is not a good position to roll out from. Like when we show you a low hand, this is the opposite end of the spectrum of where you want to be for a low hand. So again, if you're committed to posting top rolling all the time, you're going to get against an opponent who realizes, hey, if I just go way more to the side with my hook than way direct, then pull back with my hook, this guy's got nothing for me. And then you end up in that position we just showed you. So when you get against somebody who you feel is coming in against you, or who you just recently lost to because they came across the table as opposed to pulling you back, what you're going to do is set up for a low hand, which is a lot of the same dynamics, but the main factor is going to be going through the hand as opposed to over the hand. So in this sense, I'm still trying to get as much height in the setup as possible, but I'm not as focused on my knuckles facing the ceiling and pointing straight up. I want my knuckles more so pointing towards my opponent, which is going to allow me to rise up with the bottom part of my hand like this. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is, instead of containing through the top like this, I'm going to contain more with the bottom part of my hand, almost as if I was hooking, but with a lot of this rise through the wrist to create the containment here. If my opponent is hooking and going to the side, he's going to really fall into this part of my low hand. It's establishing this height and making sure that I get good connection with his fingers here. That's the really important part. And a lot of that, as much as it comes from rising, it comes a lot more from the back pressure, and the drag, right? Which is why this move is more about going through the hand, and we feel is more based on drag versus up pressure.
Yeah, and his back pressure counters my side pressure perfectly, takes me out of my lane, right? So I'm further away from my arm, which makes me weaker, and I've also fallen into the trap of coming forward while he's going back. So he's gaining control of my hand.
Exactly. And now once I'm in this position, again, I've kind of got the options depending on the situation. I can either continue with back pressure and drag him out this way, or come kind of over the hand now, but I'm pulling towards the back of the table. Or from this position here, I can drive straight to the side and take him out that way. So again, fighting the hook is with a top roll is very, very effective, but really only if you pick the correct top roll. The drag against the low hand will work, but if your opponent if the reason you're top rolling him is because his arm is stronger than yours, chances are that if we get into a drag versus drag situation, sorry,
He's too strong.
Yeah, we both did it the wrong way. So I'm gonna low hand, and you hook and drag. I'm trying to drag and I'm not getting the back pressure I need, because he can drag so hard and he's not generating enough side pressure that it's not creating, like if he pushes to the side here, that's going to open his hand up. But when he's dragging against my back pressure this way, if the reason I went here was because this is stronger than this, well, now I'm fucked, because now I'm here, right?
Yep.
So again, in this situation, if he's dragging against me, it's more about me getting this setup and really getting the jump and getting my hand out of his hand. It's kind of like Travis Bajan is a great posting top roller, and he always used to describe it as if he's trying to make himself a really awkward implement for his opponent to grab onto. And that's kind of what why he's knuckles high, like trying to get to the back of his opponent's hand, so he's got almost nothing to grab onto, so that as soon as he tries to drag me down, he's just out of there like that, right? And that kind of creates this cat and mouse game too, which is part of top rolling, right?
Yes. So typically the reason that you would use a top roll against an opponent is because they have some elements to their game that are stronger than you. So once you've gained position off the go, you may not have gained enough position to actually pin them. So you're going to have to let them work, right, and burn themselves out, so you can continue to gain more and more position.
Kind of like forcing them to work themselves into a bad position, right? This is a very obvious one with kings moving. Like when you see somebody effectively using a king's move, they're sort of baiting their opponent into using all their energy up and continuing to try to push through position that they won't get through. In a very sort of microcosmic way, you do the same thing, especially with like a low hand top roll.
Yeah, totally
and
do
hook,
the same
right?
thing. So if I've gained back pressure and I've maintained my pronation off the go, and my hooker opponent has not gained wrist flexion, then I know that I can hold all of their drives, but I still can't pull through their arm. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the waiting game, hold, make it seem like there's some gaps in pressure, so he feels like he can drive through, and then as he drives either to the side or back, I gain more and more position, because he's going to lose his wrist or lose his rise as he drives, but I'm going to stay strong in this isometric position and continue to improve my hand position and use that to gain arm position, shoulder position.
Exactly. You may have heard Devin refer to this kind of like cat and mouse, and that's kind of the idea. You're basically trying to tease and bait your opponent into thinking that there's a lane. So like, even like Alex said, you might not be able to drive through, so he might go for a drive, not trying to get through, but trying to have me fill the gap when he comes back. So he goes for a drive, he doesn't get through, and then when he relieves pressure, he's expecting me to drive hard down to the pad, and that's what he's waiting for, so that he can kind of roll or use my attack against me, right? You can do that in a hook too, where you're kind of like making it feel like you're leaving a gap, so your opponent hits into that gap, so you can then either take more pronation or separate him from his arm more. It's the same idea here, but it's much more like just out of reach, like that whole cat and mouse idea. You know, if you imagine playing with a cat with like a little like toy, you know, you're like teasing it, just trying to keep getting it to paw at you. That's the same idea here.
So essentially, in a lot of situations, it's more effective to let your opponent work themselves into a bad position than it is for you to pull them into a bad position.
Yeah.
Right. So if you just put an analogy to the lifting and being in the gym, an isometric hold is going to be a lot stronger than a dynamic effort. So I can hold this position, let's say 100 pounds of pressure, but to pull this way, I can only do that maybe 75 pounds of pressure.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more effective for me to hold this position, let my opponent work, and continue to worsen his position while I can fill in those gaps and gain position than it is for me to try to blast through.
Yeah.
So all this so far has been essentially talking about top roll versus hook, but obviously top roll versus top roll does happen. And in a lot of cases, the guy with the stronger top roll will just flash his opponent because once the hand is going to cut in control of, the top roller doesn't have enough arm strength to hold that position and they get blasted to the pad. So it looks like a flash, even though their strengths may have been close.
Yeah, and a lot of this has to do with the hill and the way the hill works out, in the idea that once you've committed to, like, if it's top roll versus top roll, and you can feel that in the setup, and you're going to commit to going to a top roll. Let's say it's because you don't have another part of your game, like Dave Chafee or Hermes, kind of that was the case for them as of late, or sorry, until late. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Because recently that obviously changed. They found a different part of the game, and that's because what we're about to talk about happened. But for the most part, like when Hermes lost to Krdecha, it's just he loses what he needs, and it's gone in a flash, because again, it's top roll versus top roll. And kind of what happens on the hill is that so I'll take the advantage. So if I'm winning the top roll, unless the other top roll can somehow find a stop on the top roll side of the hill, there is no stopping the match by transitioning to another part of the hill once you've committed top roll, and it started to go. You might see some matches where, like, right off the go, it looks like Alex is fully committed to top rolling, and then somehow right on the go he like changes his mind and dives in. He felt that in the setup. It was as if he knew it's as if he lost the top roll in the setup and then transitioned to the part before the actual go. The point is that once the go has happened and the top roll has started to go one way or the other, there's not enough time nor room or any way to maneuver on the hill to another position. I mean, maybe there is a position, but
never say never, but it definitely becomes way harder.
It becomes way harder, and it also just becomes much more dangerous, right? Like if I'm here and you decide to just dive into your shoulder, you may have seen our How to Break Your Arm video. That's how you break your arm, right? So even the most experienced pullers, again, they're not going to dive in. Like, you think about Irakli and John. Even when he was pressing and then rolled out again, like when he needed to stop the top roll again, he stops the match by creating a balance point with the top roll with back pressure, right? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of our point here, is that unless it's like Jerry, where you just dive in on that arm off the go, a stop has to be created with back pressure, which is what happened with Dave Chafee versus Vitali, which is what happened with Hermes versus Dave Chafee, which is what happened with Hermes versus Levon, is that they're both top rolling, and Hermes creates a stop, and from creating that stop, at that point, he's able to transition on the hill. But without a stop, he can't make that transition. That's kind of our point, right? Mm-hmm. With how to maneuver on the hill, is that if you both commit to top rolls and you start to lose something in the top roll, you have to be aware of the other positions on the top. So like now if you take it, he starts to lose rise, I'm thinking, okay, can I contain him and turn this into a drag low hand position? I'm not winning the drag, so now I've lost some rise, I'm losing some flexion, all I've got left is pronation. So now I'm in open top roll king's move position, and I'm retreated down the hill. Hermes Levon match, like you're Levon, Hermes gets the stop here, and from there he can try to get himself in and transition. The point is that he maneuvered all the way down the hill until he got a stop at a point on the top roll side of the hill before he transitioned to the other side.
Right.
Yeah, and again, if you think about a top roll initiation is usually either posting or dragging. It's, even though the containment, it's not necessarily trying to take flexion the way a hook is. So that's why when you have top roll versus top roll, what ends up being left behind is usually pronation.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the last thing the other top roller has to hang on to. And if they can get some rise back at the end and hang on to that pronation, you're going to end up in a king's move. If they're in a strap, you're much more likely to get a stop, especially if back pressure is somewhat relatable, which is what we saw with Hermes. Hermes got his back pressure to 100 kg, and all of a sudden he's able to get a stop near the pad with the beast known as Levon, and that had to do with that balance point being reached again, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the top roll works. That's our understanding of it. It's a very complex move. I don't want to say it's more complicated than the hook, but it is. But the hook is still, like, you know how sometimes the more simple something is, the more complicated it can be.
Top roll is not for everybody.
No, exactly.
It's for the smart people.
Yeah, where like hooking is, you know, what did Krasny say? Be a man, go in the hook, right? So like, there's some simplicity to the hook that can make it really complicated though as well. Like sometimes that can make things more complicated. The top roll is definitely more sort of moving parts and more like, well, if this, then that type of situation. So there might be more rocks to turn over with the top rolls, and especially because there are a few more of them, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's a lot to learn in the top roll. This is our best understanding of it. I'm sure we missed a bunch of things. I'm sure that there's going to be comments of people telling us we got it wrong.
But let us know in the comments down below.
Yeah.
Leave some feedback in the comments.
All those things. Subscribe, smash the bell, and
Monkeys out.
peace.